案发当天，22岁的李裁缝郑丽珍啊，跟她19岁的妹妹，从那个大众百货公司享受顺路去东林富一带，去探望她一个姐姐。所以2个人就从那边走到这个交通圈，这个以前是个交通圈了。忽然间，妹妹就听到姐姐哎了一声，跌在地上。
One life lost is too many, one too many.
Those hardcore criminals, they are not going to abide to your laws. If you want to shoot, you shoot. They will also out to kill you.
新加坡以治安良好、举世闻名。2021年，环球金融就推选新加坡为全球第4居住环境最安全的国家。在这里，与枪支有关的罪案少之又少，这是因为本地的军火管制非常严厉，违法将面对严重后果。
在邱德拔医院抢警枪并连开3枪的男子，今天在
2015年的邱德拔医院枪伤案，莫哈默伊斯甘达争夺警察手枪，开了3枪打伤警员，他被判终身监禁，鞭刑18下。2009年，死刑犯独眼龙陈楚仁因犯下枪杀罪被正法。
It is death for the man known as the One-Eyed Dragon.
独眼龙潜入一个夜总会老板的住家，以5颗子弹枪杀对方，10天后就被逮捕。现在的新加坡是开枪者死，可是时光倒流100年，就不是这么一回事。上世纪1920年代，新加坡枪械泛滥。马来亚论坛报将1925年的新加坡比为美国芝加哥，犯罪率之高，居海峡殖民地之首，在整个马来亚也算数1数2。这一年，不乏华人私会党之间的搏火，也有牵涉商人的血案，甚至好些无辜百姓被流弹射中。战后新加坡的枪支有一种特定用途，就是用在绑票。双枪胡金枝人称绑票天王，干下10多起绑票案和枪击案。经营绑票集团的卢月鹏，甚至有人专门为他制造土制手枪。到1970年代，枪支用在抢劫案就明显增多。
从这个1970到这个73之间，所谓的警方通缉要犯有好几个，主要10大要犯，双枪切面大盗林万林，还有一个外号叫番薯的陈章来，另外有一个是在73年打死一个警察的，外号叫做波大，还有瓦哈兄弟。
华和兄弟，哥哥华和，弟弟穆斯达法，2人来自大家庭。穆斯达法少年时期在感化院待过，华和更是监狱逃犯。2人跟朋友合伙，由对方供应枪械，走上持枪抢劫的不归路。
提起这个华和兄弟，他们其实是几个人组成一个打抢的团伙啊。起初的时候是打抢军装啊，跟这个油站，不过他们的枪法好像不大准啊。我第一次去打抢的时候啊，就摆了乌龙啊，开枪打到自己人了。
后来，一个同伙向警方自首，他们的组织就被识破。不过，他们还继续打抢油站、杂货店和偷车。随着同伙被警方一一逮捕， 华和兄弟1972年10月底开始东躲西逃。不过没多久，就因为一个警探而泄露了风声。
This is Labrador Forest. Right now, everything has been changed. It's 49 years since the incident happened on 29 October 1972. About 12 p.m., I was here on a Sunday doing my work. I came with my 2 off-duty policemen just for rounds. While I was having my drinks here, I saw this mini car coming up. So they came towards the store, ordered drinks. I looked at his waistband. There was a pouch. I spoke in Hokkien, telling my 2 colleagues, you have to be prepared. The guy got a gun.
曾福华撞见的是弟弟穆斯达法和他一个朋友。
That goes down right to the beach. I wanted to check them. So I shouted,
Police, berhenti! Saya pun polis. Jangan lari.
So in order to frighten them, I took out my gun and shouted,
Angkat tangan! Letak senjata! Aku tembak! Angkat tangan!
and he grabbed his friend and hold him as a shield in front of him. But when I look at the shield who was holding the drinks, he's not armed. In my mind, I say I cannot shoot an unarmed man. It goes like that, bang, bang. As soon as I open fire, the guy holding the gun must have squeezed the trigger. I felt a jerk, and I do not know where I was hit. My mind said, take up the gun, but my fingers don't move. I was paralyzed. Honestly, I feel nothing. It's just that my neck was very hot and I'm very thirsty. So that is the kind of feeling. The pain came when I was admitted to the hospital. Now you have ever sat down, crossing your feet, and then you find one of your feet is numb. So when you take it down and try to put it on the floor, you can't do it. The pain is like needles hitting your nerves. Well, it was through the papers that I came to know of their names.
射伤曾福华的是弟弟穆斯达法，他也受伤，当晚就被捉了。弟弟被捕1个多月后，华和胆敢持枪闯医院，把在养伤的弟弟劫走。
因为有枪在手啊，他们也 非常大胆，碰到警方人员的时候啊，拒捕开枪啊，所以那个时代真的是子弹横飞的时代了。
从前的新加坡为什么会子弹乱飞？军火哪里来？1970年代以前的新加坡，谋杀、抢劫和绑票都可能涉及枪械的使用。枪械泛滥的根源在于殖民地政府对军火的管制有心无力。自开埠以来，进出新加坡海港的欧洲货船运载军火，在早年相当常见。20世纪初，枪支的买卖在新加坡是合法的，有执照的人挺容易就能买到枪，而且在大人小孩都会去的百货公司都有出售。不过，更值得担心的是非法枪械。早期移民背景三教九流，携带枪械进入新加坡，在私会党駁火中派上用场。
My name is Lee Swee Tin. I was a superintendent of police. My last post was as an assistant director CID. We must try to trace back why there were so many gun incidents during the 1965 to 1970. After the Japanese occupation came the British military administration. After that, Indonesian confrontation, Vietnam War, Cambodia War, coup d'etat in Thailand. All this political upheaval has given a lot of opportunity for gun smuggling to Singapore.
那个时候因为边防的驻守没有这样严密啦，所以啊，就有很多黑枪啊，从邻近的国家输进来了。那么黑道中人跟这个侍卫党利用这些枪来打抢。
华和兄弟的枪是泰国货，而且是租来的，可见提供军火在那个年代是一门生意。据说兄弟俩也参加马来私会党。
In 1960 and 1970, there were about 120 secret societies in Singapore. All the smuggling of firearms all came by boat in the middle of the night. Singapore is an island. All around our coastal area, a lot of vulnerability to come in. At that time, we do deploy officers to look out for all these smugglers. But with so extensive coastline, they managed to find nooks and corners to sneak in, although few were arrested also.
我是在上个世纪70年代初进报界的。70年代啊，1972、73年啊，是最为暴力的时代。那一年呢，全年呢，大概有72个人死于这个凶残的暴力之下。
You go and rob using knife, which honestly nobody's scared of you.
All the criminals, they possess guns to give them a special status, special recognition, If I had a gun, the underworld people will respect me tremendously.
1972年9月18日，在女皇镇交通圈的行人道上，一名年轻女子突然倒下，她胸前出现一个流血的伤口。到场的警员起初以为她被刺伤，后来才发现是枪伤。
Whenever a new HDB new town was built, all the secret society gang members muscle in, try to occupy certain areas, or they call it to establish their own operational grounds. And sometimes it's through a lot of gang fight.
神秘子弹会不会是私会党争地盘、擦枪走火，殃及无辜？
这个女裁缝被神秘子弹打死的案件，真的是新加坡罪案史以来最神秘、难以解开的啦。当时啊，她就是捂着胸口啊，倒在地上。等到这个女裁缝送进医院，医生才发现说，她原来是中了枪弹，就是一弹穿心要命了。
Before the amendment of the Penal Code in 1984, there were rampant street robberies and secret society activities involved in protection racket. But Queenstown is quite a peaceful area. DZ was an unknown person, just a seamstress. What value, what enemy did she have? What enemy?
这起神秘子弹夺命案上了报章头条。警方事后沿着附近祖屋一户一户的搜查，还从居民手上没收了6支来福枪和1支手枪来做弹道测试。事实上，有些老百姓确实能合法拥有枪械。退役军官郑龙泉是新加坡来福枪协会资深会员，拥有自己的枪械。不过条例收紧，以前能用自动和半自动的长枪械，现在都禁止了。
Okay, what I have here today is my gun license. This from the 80s. License to possess arm. There are pages here that tell you exactly what you can do, what you cannot do. You start off with the first one. It was $30 over here. And then become 60. I think along the way it became 100. Okay, and then yeah, just increased 200. And today is 220 per year. This is delivery order for 500 rounds of bullet, okay? And there's a permit number there. So every time you want to buy bullet, you need to apply for a permit.
In the 1970s, a lot of people having firearm, you know. You are gainful employed, you are quite a good employment. We approve a firearm for you to carry air rifle, to go for shooting of wild animal. No? Some people go to gun club for practices.
1972年，警方没收女皇镇合法拥枪者的枪械来测试，却得不到什么线索。
救命啊！
有6个人告诉警方，他们听到枪声，却没有一个看到枪手。事隔50年，曾丽珍的案子仍未破解，凶手可能还活着，始终没有被定罪。
table， kau letak duit kat kau mana？ 哎！
至于结伴打劫生意人的枪匪华和兄弟，却已被警方盯得紧紧的。弟弟穆斯达法和朋友无意间跟警探曾福华对上了。曾福华中枪没死，算福大命大。事件发生当晚，被他射伤的穆斯达法就被逮捕，押送到医院去救治。
I shot him and he shot me. In fact, both of us are in the hospital. It was about 20 to 30 feet away. Mustafa claimed that Muhammad Dom shot me and not him. The inspector told him, "You thought David Chan is dead, is it? You take a look at the other window." Then he turned his face and I turned my face. Then he knew that I was not dead. Then he admitted he was the one who shot me.
穆斯达法不想束手就擒，却一直按兵不动。1972年12月13日，他跟警探搏火，已经过了1个多月。
Well, I was paralyzed only for 5 days. After 5 days, I was out.
穆斯达法腹部受伤，这个时候差不多痊愈，也已经被警方提控。
那后来呢，这个弟弟呢就被送进去这个中央医院，哇，跑去中央医院，抢了守卫的枪，就把他的弟弟借走。在这个之前，医院好像没有发生过类似的案件啊。
Those hardcore criminals, they are not going to abide to your laws.
那么他借走了他弟弟，还骑借一辆的士，还差一点要开枪打这个的士司机。
弟弟被劫走2天，警方接获通报，掌握华和兄弟的行踪。泄露风声的是他们家的亲戚。兄弟俩穷途末路，逃到惹兰古坡的回教坟场。他们在这里被警方团团包围。
那个时候我进报馆还不到2年呢，那么就接到这个消息就很兴奋哦。那么当时啊，我们4、5个意外新闻组的同事到了那个坟场那边了，我们就躲在车子的后面。当时啊，哇，已经有我看数以千计的公众啊围在坟场外面了，而警方已经封锁了现场。
I'm Kewal Singh, Agent Singapore Police Force. I was posted to the PRU Queensway. We received a message about the Hassan brothers, and then 4 of us volunteered. We arrived with our OC at Jalan Kubo, that is beside the cemetery. We were immediately led into the cemetery. We came across a hut and we went in to search.
Sir.
We shined our torchlight and saw there was a mat, a bottle of Dettol, and cotton wool. Looking towards the direction where the shot came from, we saw the 2 figures running away from the caretaker's hut into the far end of the cemetery.
震爆队去开那个催泪弹啊，在这个烟雾弥漫之中啊，就听到2、3声枪声。
After the shot, we also replied 1 or 2 shots. After that, there was total silence. We moved forward here, searching for them.
Serah diri! Angkat tangan dan maju ke hadapan!
From a distance, we saw the figure behind the tree.
I'm going to crawl over and take a look. Cover me in case they start firing again. Remember, aim high.
Yes, sir.
I'm in the police force for what purpose? My duty, I have to do it. You don't think of your families. Nothing comes into your mind at that time.
根据网络资料，从20世纪以来，新加坡有20几位警务人员命丧枪下，而1960和70年代就有7位警务人员死于枪伤， 多数是在围剿行动中丧命。不过，杀他们的没有一个是有执照的合法拥枪者。郑龙泉是枪会的会员，他1980年代申请拥枪证到现在，必须受各种条例束缚。
Everyone can apply, but whether you get, approved is another thing altogether. The applicant have to be of good standing, without any criminal record. Today, 2021, there's a new set of stricter firearms law. Between two licensed gun owners, we should not even, handle each other's guns. So they make it that strict.
在1972年12月16日，警方面对的绝非奉公守法的枪手，而是跟他们3番4次交锋的悍匪华和兄弟。警方以为重兵包围，他们应该会投降。
I moved forward, and after a few minutes, I arrived at the back of the figure. He's holding a pistol in his right hand near his head. He's dead. I took the pistol and looked for the other brother. I think he's lying there. This is the place where I found Wahab's body facing the sky, and he's holding a revolver near to his head. I believe he's shot himself.
So the Hassan brothers, we know, actually chose to end their own lives, right? So there are many reasons why people do this, right? I think the most obvious reasons was that they knew that they were in a difficult position. They were already surrounded by police officers, and there was no way out. They didn't want to be caught by the police. Why? It could be maybe shame. Even among the criminal world, there's this sense of pride within themselves. I don't want to be caught and arrested by the police because it's embarrassing for me. The other reason could be they have, psychologically come to a situation where they feel that enough is enough. They felt that it is the last few hours for them and they're prepared to leave the world.
哥哥华和就是从监狱里逃出来的逃犯，弟弟穆斯达法少年时期在感化院里待过，这或许可以解释他们不愿意再失去自由和自尊。
We don't really know, because we can never get into an individual's mind to understand why they did what they did.
华和兄弟生前持枪闯荡，死为枪下亡魂，嗜血彪悍，不得善终。1972年，22岁的裁缝曾丽珍中枪身亡。她不是黑道中人，而是个安分的年轻女子。女皇镇的交通圈是她中枪的地方。
当时没有人知道这个女裁缝是怎么一回事，就忽然间，妹妹就听到姐姐哀了一声，跌在地上，左胸呢有血流出来。我们在报馆接到电话，赶来现场的时候，人已经送进去了医院，也没有目击者可以访问。一直到10个小时后，这个女裁缝在医院死掉。
警方彻查了现场证据。
Because the bullet went through the heart, she dropped and died. The bullet was traced to a .22. So .22, it can be from a handgun or from a rifle.
Quite a number of years ago, people actually are allowed to keep rifles at home. But because of the Tanglin Hawk incident, they actually round up all the licensed gun owners that had pistol and rifle of .22 caliber.
警方人员查问了数以千计的拥枪者， 对他们私人拥有的枪械进行弹道测试，却一无所获。人们对这起案件有3种推论。
According to the younger sister, she mentioned that there was actually no gunshot heard when the sister fell to the ground. So with regards to how this shot came about, there are actually 3 possible theories. The first is that it was actually done by a sharpshooter in one of the nearby HDB flats, either in the Tanglin Halt HDB flats or the Stirling Road HDB flats. For this shot to be so precise, to occur over a long distance and be lodged in the elder sister's chest would require a telescopic lens. However, there was actually no one known to own such a lens at that time. The second theory is that there was actually a misfired shot from the nearby police station located over here. Considering that this is actually a shot that came from a further distance, this is even more unlikely. In addition, there was actually no reported misfire that occurred at that time. The third theory is that there was actually a vehicle traveling down Commonwealth Avenue, heading past Queen's Circus, and as it was driving past Queensway, a shot, intentional or accidental, was actually fired, and this hit the sister in the chest.
My own theory is that it was on a Sunday afternoon. Many people in the year of 1972, they go for overnight hunting or early morning hunting. They go for shooting of flying foxes in MacRitchie, Jurong, and Choa Chu Kang. In those days, most cars were not air conditioned. And in all probability, the chap might be on the way home. And he might have pulled the trigger and misfired.
So, assuming that this is an intentional shot, what could you comment as a psychologist about the profile of the shooter?
Based on the evidence, very little evidence and very clean crime scene that was found, it is likely that the shooter is an organized killer typology. This sort of killer would plan their offenses, they would come with a weapon, and they would clean up the crime scene and take all the evidence with them.
If such an incident is still to occur today, then there are actually new forensic technologies such as 3D scanning, as well as using lasers to more accurately pinpoint where the shot might have come from. Imagine you are facing me face to face and you fire a shot at me. This shot would hit me at approximately 90 degrees. However, if you were standing a distance away and perhaps in a HDB flat, when the round actually hits me, it will actually come at a gentler angle of maybe about 70 degrees. Based on the entry wound on the body, forensic pathologists will then be able to predict what angle this round hit the body and hence where the shooter might have been.
那么，弹道测试和现代法证科学又怎么能在协助侦破枪击案这方面发挥作用？
如果子弹找到的时候是完整的，那以子弹的口径就可以稍微缩小警方要找到的那把枪，在子弹上有小小的刮痕之类的痕迹，
而我们就会在显微镜上进行这些特征的对比。你所看到的那些线条就是子弹的特征，而我们的工作就是要寻找相同之处，来断定它是否是从同一支枪支所发射。
但是这就需要原本的那把枪。如果没有收到那把枪呢，那就无法做这样的对比。
女裁缝走路都会被枪杀，不免人人自危。不过，反枪械的情绪却是因为一名年轻警员丧命而推向最高点。1973年7月12日，如界一带发生一起很普通的公路纠纷，一位巴士司机和一个汽车司机互不相让。
一个交通意外，和司机吵架，这个王宝兴就要做核实了。
下了班的警探王宝兴是巴士乘客，新婚才几个月。 连中2颗子弹，他立即毙命。杀人之后，凶手还在光天化日之下拿走王宝兴的手枪，扬长而去。
You see, once you identify yourself as a police officer, to you is an innocent identification. But to the gunman, you may want to arrest him, you see. So he had to open fire first.
警方悬赏1万元缉拿嫌犯。事发时，有不少人在那里围观，可是大多是一问三不知。警方就向线人打探消息。
It was unfortunate that he died innocently because of trying to intervene and try to settle the dispute between the motorist and the driver.
这个枪手啊，就是那个外号叫做博达的，他也是马来西亚的通缉要犯。这个博达在王宝兴被杀的大概10天左右，在总统府附近的一间公寓外面啊，给警方埋伏了，互相破火，这个中弹死期啊。
持枪犯罪扰乱新加坡治安几十年，王宝兴的死亡加速了政府对军火的进一步管制。1973年8月，军火法令出台了，对拥枪者加强监管，对持枪犯罪施行更严峻的惩罚，包括鞭刑和死刑。
Now, prior to the Armed Offences Act, Chapter 14, implemented on 8 February 1974, the punishment for armed robbery with firearm, normally 7 years to 10 years. But nowadays, if you commit armed robbery with a firearm, whether you use it to fire a shot or you don't fire a shot, the penalty is death sentence.
它最为关键的就是说，不管是有意还是无意，在抢劫的时候开枪，都会被判死刑，就是所谓开枪者死。啊，以前是杀人者死，贩毒者死，然后现在啊是开枪者死。
You see, firearms itself is a very big thing in Singapore. It's not in America. So if you bring in an arm, you're caught, you are going to get a big number of years. And if you use a firearm, you're going to get sentenced to death.
在新法令下，第一个被判处死刑的枪手是刀巴卡。他在一家妓院开枪射伤3个人，又在天寿道跟警方搏火，于1975年9月判刑。才过了1个月，小贩达利含沙就成了第一个因为涉及2起珠宝行持枪抢劫案而被判死刑的共犯。这显示，即使只是共犯，只要是持枪抢劫，就得面对极刑。
I was the deputy public prosecutor who prosecuted his case. And when he lost the case and appealed, I was also the DPP against the titan of criminal law at that time, David Marshall. There was an off-duty auxiliary or police officer who was shot by one of the occupants using the firearm in the car. From where he was, he stood down straight away and the bullet was lodged above him. But David Marshall made good use of this defense to say that no, the person who used firearm at that time to fire was not actually firing at the police officer. Rather, he was firing at random to scare people. Therefore, he cannot be said to have used a gun in the sense of the word use. And consequently, it applies likewise to the accomplice at the scene of crime. So this, in fact, was the basis of the amendment in 1973. There is no requirement on the prosecution to prove intent on the part of the gunman.
新法令立竿见影，持枪抢劫案的数量直线下滑。加强警力，结合严刑峻法，终于有了成效。
最近几年没有发生过开枪的事件了。再加上啊，现在海陆空的那个边防啊，密不透风，就是要走私枪械是非常难的。国际上的这个非法枪械组织啊，他们也不敢贸然在新加坡买卖枪械。
In Singapore, it's very, very difficult to get a gun because it's well controlled. In Singapore, I must say that, you know, as a citizen, I'm proud that the control is so strict and our punishment is equally, you can call it even draconian. But we need it.
“你可以通过 MeListen 应用程序、Spotify 或 Apple Podcasts 收听更多新加坡的重大案件。